He, a billionaire CEO impossible to work for, has 47 former assistants on his victim list. She, a bankrupt and indebted former CEO, takes the hellish job of Damien's assistant. In the second week, when he yells about a mistake, Sophia does what no one has ever done, yells back, confronting him about respectful treatment. Shocked, Damien is intrigued by her courage. Gradually, Sophia civilizes the tyrant, implementing improvements and reducing the chaos by 60%. Working 14-hour days, the partnership turns into attraction. But in a crisis, Damien betrays her to protect his position. Betrayed, Sophia hands in her resignation, confronting him about how his fear of betrayal sabotages everything. Get ready for a twist where an unbearable tycoon is confronted by a fearless assistant, and a final betrayal may be the key to redemption, proving that love and trust transform the worst bosses into the best partners. Watch this story to the end. You will be amazed by this story. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing, the shrill ringing of the alarm clock at 5 in the morning shattered the silence of the small apartment in Queens, New York. Sofia Martinez got out of the narrow bed, her feet touching the cold floor of the room that barely fit a dresser besides the bed. Through the window, the city was still asleep under a gray haze that seemed to mirror the weight on her shoulders. At 29 years old, Sophia had experienced both the taste of success and the bitterness of betrayal. Just 2 years earlier, she ran a promising tech startup with an office in Silicon Alley and a team of 15 employees who respected her as a visionary leader. Sofia Martinez was the name that appeared in business magazines, the young entrepreneur who promised to revolutionize the corporate app market in the US. It all crumbled when her partner, Richard Allen, someone she had trusted blindly since, in college, forged documents that incriminated her in alleged financial irregularities. Within weeks, investors pulled out, employees resigned, and the specialized media that had once celebrated her began to treat her as a pariah in the business world. The company went bankrupt, taking with it not only Sophia's dream, but also her reputation and all her savings. Now, wearing a black blazer already faded at the edges, Sophia was preparing for another day in the only position she had been able to find after months of fruitless searching. The executive job market systematically rejected her. Her name was associated with the fabricated scandal, and no large company wanted the risk of hiring her. Debts were piling up. Overdue rent, credit card maxed out, legal fees from the legal battle she was waging to clear her name. It was then that the opportunity arose at Cross Consulting, a multinational business consulting firm headquartered in Manhattan. The position was for the executive assistant to the CEO, Damien Cross. Sophia knew the man's terrible reputation. She had read dozens of devastating reviews online, accounts from former employees who described a toxic work environment with a boss impossible to please, 47 assistants in 5 years. The number was dauntingly revealing, but Sophia had no choice. The salary offered was enough to pay off her debts in a year if she managed to save every penny. And unlike the other candidates who probably applied for the position, Sophia was not just another assistant looking for experience. She had been a CEO. She knew what it meant to make decisions under extreme pressure and deal with difficult personalities in the corporate world. The Cross Consulting building in Manhattan's financial district was imposing, with its mirrored glass walls reflecting the frenetic movement of Wall Street. Sophia crossed the marble lobby, her heels echoing in the morning silence. She had arrived 2 hours before the official start time to organize Damien Cross's daily schedule, a routine she had learned was essential to survive in the first few weeks. Damien's office occupied the entire 40th floor with a panoramic view of the city, Piles of documents covered every available surface, evidence of the organizational chaos she had been trying to remedy. Sophia began sorting the reports by order of priority, a skill she had developed when she ran her own company. At 7 o'clock sharp, Damien arrived. Tall, broad-shouldered, and with dark hair slightly graying at the temples, he exuded an authority that could be felt meters away. His blue eyes were piercing, always seeming to evaluate and find faults in everything around him. He wore impeccable suits that cost more than Sophia's monthly rent, but there was a constant tension in his posture, as if he were perpetually prepared for battle. "Are the reports from the Chicago branch ready?" was his first question, without even a good morning. "They are on your desk, organized by department and with an executive summary that I prepared highlighting the critical points," Sophia replied, maintaining a professional tone. Damien picked up the documents and flipped through them quickly. "This format is not correct. I want the revenue data first, then expenses, then projections. Redo everything." It was the third time this week that he had changed the requested format for the same reports. Sophia took a deep breath, remembering the bills she needed to pay, the debts she needed to settle. She had faced skeptical investors, demanding clients, and the constant pressure of keeping a startup running. Damien Cross was challenging, but not impossible. "Of course, Mr. Cross. How soon do you need it?" "Yesterday," he replied dryly, disappearing into his office. Sophia sat down at her desk in the adjacent space and began reformatting the reports for the third time. As she worked, she watched other employees pass by in the hallway, all seemingly deliberately avoiding looking in the direction of Damien's office. She understood the fear. His reputation was well known throughout the company, but Sophia had lost much more than a bad job. She had lost a company she had built with her own hands. She had lost confidence in the corporate world. She had lost almost everything she considered important. If she could survive Damien Cross, maybe she could rebuild her life. The intercom buzzed. "Martinez, bring coffee. No sugar, no milk, exact temperature." Sophia stood up, smoothed her skirt, and headed to the small executive kitchen. While preparing the coffee exactly as he liked it, information she had obtained by discreetly interrogating former employees, she wondered how many of the previous 47 assistants had given up on the first day. She would not be the 48th. No, the third week working for Damien Cross, Sophia had developed a survival routine. She arrived at 5:30 in the morning, organized his impossible schedule, anticipated his needs, and took a deep breath before each interaction. She had managed to last longer than any previous assistant, but the price was high. She slept only 4 hours a night and lived in a state of constant alert. It was a rainy Thursday when everything changed. Damien had cancelled 3 consecutive meetings to redo a report that, according to him, was completely inadequate. Sophia had spent the last 6 hours reformulating the same data in 5 different ways, each version rejected with increasingly acidic comments. "This is unacceptable," Damien said, throwing the pages onto her desk. "A 10-year-old could do better. You're wasting my time and money." Sophia felt something break inside her. Maybe it was the accumulated fatigue or the frustration of seeing her expertise wasted on meaningless, repetitive tasks. Or maybe it was simply the fact that she had run a $15 million company and was now being treated as incompetent for errors that weren't even hers. "Mr. Cross," she said, slowly rising from her chair, "can I speak with you in private?" Damien raised an eyebrow, clearly not used to direct requests from his assistants. "You have 2 minutes." Sophia followed him to his office and closed the door. When she turned to face him, there was a determination in her eyes that he hadn't seen before. "You asked me to reformulate this report 6 times today," she began, keeping her voice steady, each time with different and contradictory instructions. "In the first version, you wanted the revenue data first. In the third, you said you wanted market analysis at the beginning. In the fifth, you asked for charts that in the second version, you said were unnecessary. Damien crossed his arms, his expression hardening. So what? If you were competent, you would understand what I want. No, Mr. Cross. Sophia's voice rose slightly. If you were an effective leader, you would give clear and consistent instructions. I'm not a mind reader, I'm a professional. And as a professional, I need to tell you that this behavior is not only inefficient, it's destructive. The silence that followed was deafening. Damien stared at her with a mixture of shock and fury that Sophia had never seen. For a moment, she was sure she would be fired on the spot. You dare to tell me how to do my job? His voice was dangerously low. I dare to say that I've seen companies fail because of exactly this type of management, Sophia replied, surprising herself with her own audacity. I used to be a CEO, Mr. Cross. I know what it is to lead a team, and I know what happens when a leader treats their employees as enemies instead of partners. Damien took half a step back. You were a CEO? I was, of a tech startup that reached a valuation of $15 million before it all fell apart. Sophia felt a pang of pain mentioning her past, but continued. I learned the hard way that leadership isn't about controlling every detail. It's about trusting your team and creating an environment where people can give their best. If you were a CEO, what are you doing here as my assistant? Damien's question had a different tone now, still suspicious, but with a trace of genuine curiosity. Sophia hesitated. Revealing the whole truth would be exposing herself in a way that could destroy any credibility she still had. But something in his gaze, perhaps the first spark of real interest she had seen, made her continue. I was betrayed by someone I trusted. My partner forged documents to incriminate me and kept the company. I lost everything, the company, my reputation, my savings. No one else wants to hire me in an executive position. She took a deep breath. But I haven't lost my knowledge or my experience, and I can guarantee you that what you're doing here isn't leadership. It's tyranny, disguised as perfectionism. Damien studied her for a long moment. Sophia braced herself for the explosion, for the yelling, for the summary dismissal. Instead, he did something completely unexpected. He sat down heavily in his armchair and ran his hands over his face. 47 assistants, he muttered. They all quit. And they were all probably good professionals who were destroyed by an impossible work environment, Sophia replied, her voice softening slightly. Damien raised his eyes to her. You're telling me I'm the problem. I'm saying you're too smart, not to realize that when 47 people fail at the same job, maybe the problem isn't the people. Baha. For a moment that seemed to last an eternity, they stared at each other. Sophia could see gears working in Damien's mind, as if he were processing a possibility he had never considered. This report, he said finally, pointing to the scattered papers. What would you do if it were your company? Sophia blinked, surprised by the question. Well, first I'd identify what the real objective is. Do you need to impress the board? Identify operational problems, project growth. Each objective requires a different approach. What if I don't know what the objective is? The question was asked in such a low voice that Sophia almost didn't hear it. But there was something in the admission, a vulnerability that completely contradicted the tyrannical facade he maintained. Then we start there, she said softly. We identify what really needs to be communicated and to whom. Then we build the presentation around those specific objectives. Damien nodded slowly. Sit down, he said, indicating the chair in front of his desk. Show me what you would do. It was the first time Sophia had sat in that office except to receive a criticism or confusing instruction. As she pulled up the chair, she realized that something fundamental had changed between them. She had confronted Damien Cross and survived. More than that, She had accomplished something that 47 women before her had not. She had made him listen. In the 2 weeks following the confrontation in the office, the dynamic between Sophia and Damien changed in a subtle but noticeable way. She was no longer just an assistant trying to guess the impossible wishes of a tyrannical boss. She had become an unofficial consultant, someone whose opinion he had begun to value, even if reluctantly. The first real change happened when Sophia suggested reorganizing Damien's scheduling system. For years, he had maintained consecutive meetings without breaks, creating a domino effect that delayed the entire schedule when any appointment extended beyond the planned time. 15 minutes between each meeting, Sophia proposed, showing him a new agenda layout. It seems like little, but it will eliminate the stress of arriving late and give you time to process information between appointments. Damien had initially resisted. Time is money, Martinez. I can't waste 15 minutes every hour. With all due respect, Mr. Cross, you already waste much more time redoing conversations that could have been better conducted if you weren't racing against the clock. The logic was irrefutable, and he knew it. Reluctantly, he implemented the change. Within a week, Sophia noticed that he seemed less tense, his decisions were more assertive, and surprisingly, he had stopped yelling at other employees during meetings. The second transformation came when Sophia observed how he treated his direct team. During a department meeting, she saw Damien verbally tear down a manager for a minor error in the quarterly sales figures. "Do you have 2 minutes?" she asked when the meeting ended and the office emptied. "Now you're going to tell me how to conduct meetings too?" There was irritation in his voice, but not the blind fury of before. "I'm going to tell you a story," Sophia said, closing the door. "When my startup was growing, I had a brilliant developer named Kevin. He made a mistake that almost cost us an important contract. I ripped him apart in front of the whole team, thinking it would serve as an example." Damien leaned back in his chair, clearly intrigued despite himself. Kevin never risked an innovative idea again. He became a mediocre employee who did only the bare minimum to avoid being fired. I lost not only his creativity, but also the respect of the other developers, who saw how I treated a colleague. And what's the moral of the story? That fear may seem effective in the short term, but it destroys innovation and loyalty. That manager you humiliated today? He has 15 years of experience and knows this market better than anyone in this company. But after what happened, I doubt he'll share important insights again. Damien was silent for a long moment. "You're suggesting I apologize?" "I'm suggesting you talk to him as the experienced professional he is, not as an incompetent subordinate." "I don't apologize," Damien said firmly. "It's a sign of weakness." "It's a sign of leadership," Sophia countered. "True leaders admit mistakes and correct harmful behaviors." Damien stared at her for a long moment before getting up abruptly. "Get Thompson in here." Sophia watched through the glass door as Damien had a 20-minute conversation with the manager. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw the body, language of both men changing gradually. Thompson, who had left the previous meeting downcast and defeated, was now gesturing animatedly, sharing ideas. When the conversation ended, both men were smiling. "How did it go?" Sophia asked when Thompson left. "He had 3 excellent suggestions for improving our numbers next quarter," Damien admitted, seeming genuinely surprised. "Suggestions he didn't share in the meeting because he expected to be interrupted and criticized. And," Damien sighed, "and I acknowledged that my approach hadn't been the most productive." It was the closest to an apology that Sophia expected to hear, and she smiled discreetly. The third change happened when Sophia noticed that Damien worked until 11 at night every day, surviving on coffee and poorly chewed sandwiches between meetings. "Mr. Cross, can I ask a personal question?" "Depends on how personal." When was the last time you left this office before 9 at night? Damien stopped typing and stared at her. Why does it matter? Because exhausted leaders make bad decisions. Because employees who see the boss working 18 hours a day think they need to do the same to impress. And because... She hesitated. Because I've seen firsthand what happens when someone sacrifices everything for the company and then loses everything anyway. There was a vulnerability in her voice that made Damien completely stop what he was doing. I trusted my partner so much that I never questioned when he started working later, having private meetings, making decisions without consulting me. I thought he was being dedicated like me. I didn't realize he was planning to betray me. And you think if you hadn't worked so much, you would have noticed? I think if I had had a life outside of the company, I would have had enough perspective to see the warning signs. Damien processed this in silence. You're suggesting I stop working so much? I'm suggesting you stop confusing hours worked with productivity. A rested CEO who works 10 focused hours is more valuable than an exhausted CEO who works 18 hours making bad decisions. The following Friday, for the first time in years, Damien Cross left the office at 7 in the evening. Sophia saw through the window as he walked to his car, looking almost uncomfortable with the sunlight that was still shining in the sky. On Monday, he arrived 15 minutes later than usual, but seemed more alert and focused. During the morning meeting, he made 3 important decisions that had been postponed for weeks. Martinez, he said at the end of the day, those changes you suggested, they're working. I know, she replied simply. How do you know? Sophia smiled. Because you didn't yell at anyone today, and because you managed to solve in 4 hours problems that you've been dragging on for a month. Damien nodded slowly. For the first time since she had started working for him, Sophia saw something that might have been gratitude in his eyes. The first sign that something was wrong came on a cold Monday in June. Sophia had just organized the week's agenda when she received a call from the legal department of Cross Consulting asking her to attend an urgent and confidential meeting. On the 15th floor, Helen Carter, the general counsel, greeted her with a somber expression that immediately triggered all of Sophia's instincts. The room was also occupied by 2 men in suits she didn't recognize. Ms. Martinez, I need to ask you some questions about your previous professional experience, Helen began, placing a thick folder on the table. Sophia felt her stomach sink. Of course. How can I help? We've received some concerning information about your previous company, TechFlow Solutions. Helen opened the folder and pulled out a series of printed documents. Apparently, there are ongoing investigations into financial irregularities that may have involved you directly. The world seemed to tilt beneath Sophia's feet. She immediately recognized the documents. They were the same forged papers that Richard had used to destroy her reputation, now being presented as legitimate evidence. These accusations are false, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. My lawyer has been working for 2 years to prove that these documents were forged by my former partner. We understand that's your version of the facts, one of the men in suits interjected, but we need to consider the risks to Cross Consulting's reputation. Having an employee under criminal investigation could affect our contracts with government agencies. Criminal investigation? Sophia felt her blood run cold. There is no criminal investigation. These are just civil allegations that have already been... Actually, there is, said Helen, sliding another document across the table. The IRS opened a formal investigation last week based on new evidence that was presented. Sophia picked up the paper with trembling hands. It was official. Her name was being investigated for tax evasion and document forgery. The dates showed that the investigation had been initiated exactly 1 week after she started working at Cross Consulting. "This is impossible," she murmured. "Richard wouldn't have. He already got what he wanted. Why reopen this now?" The answer came like a punch to the stomach. One of the men in suits slid a photo across the table. It was her leaving the Cross Consulting building, accompanied by a newspaper article with the headline, "Ex-CEO investigated for fraud, gets job at multinational." "Your former partner contacted the press as soon as he found out where you were working," Helen explained. "Apparently, he claims that you're using your new access to corporate information to repeat the same crimes you're being investigated for." Sophia felt nauseous. Richard hadn't just destroyed her company and her reputation. Now, he was systematically sabotaging any attempt she made to rebuild her life. "Ms. Martinez," Helen continued, "I understand that this situation is difficult for you, but I need to be clear. Cross Consulting cannot keep an employee who is under criminal investigation, especially in a position that involves access to confidential financial information." "You're firing me?" The question came out in a whisper. "We're placing you on paid administrative leave while the investigation is ongoing. If you are cleared of all charges, we may reconsider your position." Sophia knew this was a disguised dismissal. IRS investigations could last for years, especially when fueled by a determined adversary with unlimited resources. "I need to speak with Mr. Cross," she said, getting up abruptly. "Mr. Cross has already been informed of the situation," Helen replied. "He agreed that this is the best course of action at the moment." The words hit Sophia like a physical betrayal. Damien knew. He had agreed to her suspension without even talking to her first. Sophia went straight to the 40th floor, ignoring the curious glances of the employees. The door to Damien's office was closed, but she entered without knocking. "You knew," she said without preamble. Damien looked up from the documents he was analyzing. His expression was carefully neutral, but Sophia could see tension in his shoulders. "Sophia, you knew they were going to suspend me, and you didn't tell me anything. You let me find out in a room full of strangers, treating me like a criminal. It was a corporate decision. There was nothing I could do." "Yes, there was," Sophia's voice rose. "You could have talked to me first. You could have given me a chance to explain. You could have trusted me like I trusted you when I decided to stay and help you become a better leader." Damien stood up, walking around the desk. "You don't understand the pressure I'm facing. The board is questioning all my decisions. I can't afford to look like I'm protecting an employee under investigation. So this is about appearances. About protecting your position. It's about protecting the company. It's about protecting yourself." Sophia felt tears of frustration burn her eyes. "You're doing exactly what you've always done, sacrificing people to avoid any personal risk." "I had no choice." "You always have a choice, Damien. The difference is that now I see that you choose self-preservation every time you're tested." There was a long silence. Sophia could see conflict in his eyes, as if part of him wanted to fight for her, but the stronger part, the part that had learned never to trust anyone, was winning. "Sophia," he said finally, "you need to understand." "No." She shook her head. "I understand perfectly. You taught me a lot about leadership in the last few weeks, but apparently I didn't teach you anything about courage." She headed to the door, then stopped and turned around one last time. "You know what the difference is between the two of us, Damien? I was betrayed by someone I trusted completely. You betray people before they even have a chance to betray you. And that makes you exactly the kind of person you fear most, someone who doesn't deserve trust." Sophia left the office, gathered her personal belongings from her desk, and left the Cross Consulting building, knowing that she probably would never return. Outside, in the fine afternoon rain, she wondered if she had been a fool to believe that Damien Cross could actually change. 3 weeks after leaving Cross Consulting, Sophia was sitting in the small coffee shop in Queens, where she used to have breakfast before work, leafing through job classifieds in the local paper. Her savings were running out quickly, and the IRS investigation had made her situation even more desperate. No company even wanted to consider her for an interview. That's when a familiar voice made her look up. "Can I sit down?" It was Thompson, the manager she had seen Damien humiliate and then try to repair the damage. He was holding a cup of coffee and looked genuinely concerned. "Sure," Sophia said, closing the newspaper, "but if you're here on Damien's orders..." "I'm not." Thompson sat down and lowered his voice. "In fact, he doesn't know I'm here. No one at the company knows." Sophia studied him with curiosity. "Then why are you?" "Because I need to tell you something that could change everything." Thompson looked around nervously before continuing. "About the IRS investigation. About how it really started." Sophia's heart raced. "What do you mean?" "I've worked at Cross Consulting for 15 years. I know all the procedures, all the company's political connections." Thompson took a deep breath. "The investigation against you wasn't initiated by your former partner alone. He had help." "What kind of help?" "Someone from inside the company facilitated the process. Someone with connections in the federal government who knew exactly how and when to present the charges to cause maximum damage." Sophia felt her blood run cold. "You're saying someone from Cross Consulting?" "I'm saying someone very powerful wanted you out of that company from the moment you arrived." Thompson pulled an envelope from the inside pocket of his suit jacket. "And I have evidence." With trembling hands, Sophia opened the envelope. Inside were copies of emails, phone records, and even transcripts of conversations. As she read, a sinister pattern emerged. "Margaret Whitfield," she whispered, recognizing the name in the documents. "The chairman of the board," Thompson confirmed. "She orchestrated everything. The contact with your former partner, the pressure on the IRS, even the leak to the press. But why? She didn't even know me." Thompson hesitated before answering. "Because you were changing Damien, and an improved version of Damien Cross threatened the control she's maintained over him for years." Sophia frowned. "I don't understand." "Margaret isn't just the chairman of the board. She's been Damien's mentor since he took over as CEO 8 years ago. Every important move he makes goes through her first. She molded him to be exactly the kind of leader who keeps the real power in the hands of the board." Thompson pointed to one of the emails in the envelope. "Look at this conversation between her and Richard Allen. She not only provided information about your schedule and routine at the company, she literally coached him on how to time the investigation to cause maximum public embarrassment." Sophia read with growing horror. The messages showed a meticulously planned conspiracy to destroy any positive influence she might have on Damien. "She knew you were helping him become a more human, more independent leader," Thompson continued. "And that terrified her. A Damien who trusts his own team, who makes decisions based on relationships instead of just numbers, is a Damien she can't control." "But Damien agreed to my suspension," Sophia said, still feeling the pain of the betrayal. "Because Margaret presented the situation as an existential threat to the company. She said the board would vote to remove him as CEO if he didn't take immediate action." Thompson leaned forward. "Sophia, you need to understand. Damien has been manipulated for years. Margaret uses his fear of losing control to keep him under her control." Sophia processed this information. "How did you get this evidence?" "Because I'm not the only employee who noticed the positive changes you brought. There's a whole group of us, mid-level managers, who saw Damien transform from a tyrant into a real leader during the weeks you worked with him." Thompson smiled sadly. For the first time in years, we had hoped that things could improve at the company. And you decided to investigate? We decided to protect the only person who managed to humanize our boss. Thompson pointed to another document. This is a record of a call between Margaret and her contact at the IRS, scheduled for the day after. Your first confrontation with Damien in the office. Sophia read the transcript. Margaret had clearly instructed her contact to expedite any pending investigation related to Sophia Martinez, offering full cooperation from Cross Consulting to facilitate the process. She was monitoring you from day one, Thompson said, waiting for the first opportunity to get rid of you. Why are you showing me this? Sophia asked. You're risking your job. Because I saw my boss transform into a better person because of the work you did with him. And because I saw how he was after you left, he went back to being the tyrant he was before, but now with an air of defeat I've never seen in him. Thompson got up to leave, but stopped. Sophia, there's one more thing you need to know. Margaret is planning to use her successful investigation of a corrupt employee as justification for taking direct control of the company's operations. She wants to reduce Damien to a figurehead. And Damien knows this? Damien doesn't know anything. He still believes Margaret is his most trusted ally. Thompson left another smaller envelope on the table. These are financial records showing that Margaret herself has a stake in 3 competing companies. She's literally sabotaging Cross Consulting. From the inside out, Sophia picked up the second envelope, her mind already working furiously. Thompson, why are you really doing this? He smiled for the first time since he had sat down. Because when Damien called me back into the office, after that terrible meeting, for the first time in 15 years, he asked me my opinion for real. He listened to me, and I saw in his eyes that he was genuinely interested in what I had to say. And that changed something for you. It changed everything. For the first time in years, I felt valued as a professional instead of just tolerated. As an employee, Thompson grabbed his coat. You gave that to him, Sophia. You taught him to see people as partners instead of threats. And now Margaret is systematically destroying everything you built together. After Thompson left, Sophia was alone in the coffee shop, staring at the documents spread out on the table. For the first time in weeks, she felt something other than despair. She felt anger, a clean, focused anger against injustice and manipulation. Margaret Whitfield had orchestrated her destruction not for any crime she had committed, but simply for having helped Damien become a better person. And now she was using that victory to consolidate even more power over a man who didn't even know he was being manipulated. Sophia looked out the coffee shop window at the bustle of New York City. She had 2 options: accept defeat and try to rebuild her life somewhere else, or fight for justice and perhaps, in the process, save not only her own reputation, but also free Damien from the clutches of someone who was using his fears against him. For the first time in weeks, Sophia knew exactly what she needed to do. With Thompson's evidence in hand, Sophia spent the next 3 days meticulously planning her approach. She needed not only to expose Margaret Whitfield, but to do so in a way that protected Damien and the employees who had risked everything to help her. She decided to schedule a meeting directly with the board of directors of Cross Consulting, bypassing both Margaret and Damien. What she didn't expect was to discover on the morning of the scheduled meeting that Margaret had anticipated her move. Sophia was getting ready in her small apartment when the phone rang. It was Dr. David Miller, the lawyer representing her in the legal battle against Richard. Sophia, I need to give you some terrible news. His voice was strained. The IRS investigation has been expanded. Now it includes charges of money laundering and racketeering. Sophia felt her legs weaken. That's impossible. Based on what? Apparently, they've discovered suspicious financial transactions between your personal account and offshore accounts during the period you were working at Cross Consulting. What transactions? I don't even have access to offshore accounts. Sophia, the lawyer's voice was laden with a resignation she had never heard before. The evidence is very compelling. Transfers of substantial sums to accounts in the Cayman Islands, all with digital signatures that match your access credentials at Cross Consulting. Sophia leaned against the wall, feeling the world spin. Doctor, that evidence is false. Someone is forging. I know you believe that, but... He hesitated. Sophia, the district attorney is going to seek your pre-trial detention, probably today. The phone fell from Sophia's hands. Through the apartment window, she could see 2 black cars parked on the street. They weren't there when she woke up. Margaret hadn't just anticipated her move. She had declared all-out war. With trembling hands, Sophia picked up the phone and dialed Thompson's number. Thompson, it's me. I need... Sophia, I can't talk to you. His voice was strained, almost whispering. Margaret found out about our conversation. She's firing everyone who had any contact with you. And she's claiming that you tried to bribe employees to forge evidence against her. What? She has recordings, Sophia. Recordings of our conversation in the coffee shop, edited to look like you were offering me money to fabricate accusations. Against her. Sophia felt nauseous. The evidence you showed me has been declared fake. Margaret claims you forged it using your technology skills from your old company. The line was cut off. Sophia tried to call back, but the number was already out of service. She ran to the computer and tried to access the digital copies of the evidence that Thompson had given her. The screen showed an error message. Files corrupted or removed. Someone had hacked her system and deleted everything. The building intercom rang. Sophia looked out the window and saw 2 men in suits getting out of one of the black cars, federal agents. In a panic, she grabbed the physical documents that Thompson had left and tried to scan them quickly. But when she put them on the scanner, she discovered that the pages were blank. The ink had completely disappeared. Ink that disappears over time. Margaret had planned even that. The intercom rang again, more insistently. Sophia knew she had perhaps 2 minutes before they gained access to the building. She tried to call Damien, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried the Cross Consulting landline. Cross Consulting, good morning. I urgently need to speak to Damien Cross. It's about Sophia Martinez. One moment. There was a pause. I'm sorry, but Mr. Cross has left specific instructions not to accept calls related to Ms. Martinez. Can I transfer you to legal? No, The line was cut off. Sophia heard footsteps on the building stairs. Male voices discussing which apartment. Was 3B. In utter desperation, she called the last number she could think of, Margaret Whitfield's direct line, which she had memorized from Thompson's documents. Margaret answered on the second ring. Sophia Martinez. The voice was icy but satisfied. I imagined you'd call. Why are you doing this to me? Because you're a threat. You made Damien start questioning methods that have worked for years. You made him think he can trust people. And that's so terrible? It's dangerous. Trust is a weakness that leaders can't afford to have. Margaret laughed humorlessly. You almost destroyed years of careful work to keep Damien focused and productive. Focused on what you want, you mean? Focused on what the company needs. Damien is brilliant but too emotional. He needs strong guidance to avoid making decisions based on feelings. Sophia heard banging on the apartment door. Federal police, open the door. You orchestrated all of this, she said to Margaret. The investigation, the false evidence, everything. I proved that you're exactly the kind of dangerous person I thought you were from the start. An opportunist, willing to manipulate a vulnerable man for personal gain. I helped him. You weakened him. And weak men make bad decisions that cost millions. The banging on the door became more insistent. Ms. Martinez, we know you're in there. Open the door or we're going to force our way in. Sophia looked around the small apartment that had been her refuge in recent months. In a matter of minutes, she would be taken into custody, accused of crimes she didn't commit, based on evidence that had been skillfully fabricated. Margaret, she said, a last attempt to appeal. Damien trusts you. He has no idea what you really are. And he never will, because you, the only person who could open his eyes, will be in prison for the next several years fighting charges that will be impossible to refute. The line was cut off at the exact moment the apartment door splintered. As the agents handcuffed her and read her rights, Sophia felt something die inside her. It wasn't just her freedom that was being taken away. It was her faith that the truth would eventually prevail, that good people like Damien and Thompson could triumph over manipulators like Margaret and Richard. In the federal police car, looking for the last time at Queens through the rear window, Sophia realized that Margaret had been right about one thing. She had been naive to believe that evidence and truth would be enough against someone with power, resources, and a complete lack of scruples. For the first time since it all began, Sophia wondered if she shouldn't simply give up fighting and accept that some battles were impossible to win. 3 days in a federal precinct-holding cell were enough for Sophia to reach a state of mental clarity she hadn't experienced in months. Stripped of all the distractions of the outside world, she was finally able to see the game Margaret was playing with complete clarity. The revelation came when her lawyer, Dr. Miller, brought bad news during the Wednesday visit. Sophia, I need to be honest with you. The evidence against you is impressively solid. Whoever orchestrated this has extraordinary resources and technical knowledge. He opened a folder, but there's something strange I can't understand. What? The financial transfers you supposedly made, they're too perfect. Every transaction, every digital trace, every electronic signature, everything is meticulously documented and filed. Sophia frowned. And why is that strange? Because real criminals make mistakes. They leave gaps, inconsistencies, conflicting evidence. But your case, it's as if someone wanted to ensure you were caught, not that you escaped. It was then that the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Sophia rose abruptly from the plastic chair. Doctor, I need you to do something for me. I need you to investigate Margaret Whitfield's bank accounts, specifically transactions in the last 3 months. Sophia, I can't just... And I need you to check if there's any connection between her and digital security companies or law firms specializing in cybercrime. Dr. Miller studied her with curiosity. Why do you think that's important? Because Margaret isn't just trying to frame me. She's creating a model case to show the cross-consulting board how she can protect the company from internal threats. I'm her perfect example. I don't understand. Sophia began to pace the small visiting room. Margaret wants total control of cross-consulting. But to achieve that, she needs to prove to the board that she's indispensable. What's better than discovering a corrupt employee trying to steal from the company? You're suggesting she created a criminal so she could catch her. I'm suggesting she turned me into the perfect villain for her heroic narrative. Sophia stopped, pacing. Doctor, I need one more thing. I need to talk to Damien Cross. Sophia, he's refused to accept your calls, not by phone, in person, as my legal right to confront my accuser. Dr. Miller shook his head. Damien Cross isn't technically your accuser. The charges came from the IRS. But the initial evidence came from cross-consulting, didn't it? And Margaret used internal company information to build the case against me. That's true, but then I have a legal right to question how that information was obtained and whether it was manipulated. Sophia leaned forward. Doctor, trust me, if I can talk to Damien face to face, I can make him see what Margaret is really doing. 2 hours later, Dr. Miller achieved what seemed impossible, a court order allowing Sophia to confront representatives of cross-consulting about the origin of the evidence against her. Officially, it was a standard legal procedure. Unofficially, it was Sophia's only chance to reach Damien before Margaret completely consolidated her control over him. On Friday morning, escorted by 2 federal agents, Sophia was taken to the cross-consulting building. She wore the same faded black blazer from her first day of work, ironically, the only professional clothing she had left after the agents searched her apartment. The meeting was scheduled to take place in the conference room on the 30th floor, neutral territory between Margaret's office on the 25th floor and Damien's on the 40th. When Sophia entered the room, she found Margaret sitting calmly at one end of the table, flanked by 2 outside lawyers. Damien was on the other side of the table, and Sophia felt her heart clench when she saw him. He seemed to have aged years in a matter of weeks. There were deep circles under his eyes, and his posture, once always confident and imposing, was slumped as if he were carrying an invisible weight. "Ms. Martinez," said Margaret with a cold smile. "How nice to see you again." Sophia ignored Margaret completely and focused on Damien. "You look tired." "Sophia," Damien's voice was rough, as if he hadn't slept in days. "Why did you do this?" "Do what?" "You know what you did." He pointed to a folder on the table. "The transfers, the offshore accounts, the theft of confidential information." "Damien, look at me." Sophia leaned forward, ignoring the lawyers and agents around. "Really, look at me. Do you believe I'm capable of that?" For a moment, Damien's eyes met hers. Sophia saw confusion and pain, but also a spark of something else. Doubt. "The evidence is irrefutable," Margaret interjected quickly. "Damien, don't let her manipulate you emotionally. That's exactly the kind of behavior we must avoid." "Margaret is right," said one of Margaret's lawyers. "Ms. Martinez, we are here only to clarify how you gained access to the information you used in your fraudulent schemes." "What schemes?" Sophia kept her eyes fixed on Damien. "Damien, answer me a simple question. In the weeks we worked together, did I ever, even once, ask for access to financial information? Did I ask to see accounts? Did I demonstrate any interest in confidential data?" Damien hesitated. "No, but what? Do you remember any time I demonstrated interest in anything other than helping you to be a better leader?" "Sophia," Margaret interjected again, "emotional manipulation is a classic tactic of criminals. Damien, don't be swayed by—" "Margaret," said Sophia, finally turning to face her, "explain something to me. How did you know exactly which documents to check to discover my alleged fraud?" "What do you mean?" "The most effective investigations follow leads, but you found evidence of crimes that no one suspected existed. How did you know where to look?" Margaret exchanged a quick glance with her lawyers. "We received an anonymous tip." "From whom?" "That's confidential." Sophia smiled for the first time in days. "Of course it is." She turned back to Damien. "You want to know the truth? Margaret orchestrated all of this. My investigation, the false evidence, even my arrest to prove to the board that she's indispensable as your protector." "That's ridiculous," Margaret said, but there was a note of nervousness in her voice. "Is it?" Sophia pulled a paper from her pocket, the only thing the agents had allowed her to bring. "Damien, do you remember what you told me the day I was suspended? That the board was questioning all your decisions?" Damien nodded reluctantly. "And who was it that told you that?" Damien's eyes moved involuntarily to Margaret. "Now tell me," Sophia continued, "since I left, how many other internal threats has Margaret discovered? How many other supposedly disloyal employees has she identified?" The silence in the room was palpable, Sophia could see the gears working. In Damien's mind, the pieces starting to fall into place. "Margaret," Damien said slowly, "I need to talk to you in private." "Damien, don't let her manipulate you by—" "Now!" The tension in the room was so dense it could be cut with a knife. Sophia knew that the next few minutes would determine not only her fate, but also whether Damien would finally see Margaret for who she really was. Damien and Margaret left for an adjacent room, leaving Sophia alone with the lawyers and federal agents. Through the glass walls, she could see the two of them talking intensely. Margaret gestured in a controlled manner, maintaining her professional demeanor. While Damien looked increasingly tense, the conversation lasted exactly 12 minutes. When they returned, the expression on Damien's face had changed completely. "Margaret explained to me that you're trying to sow discord between us to escape the charges," he said, but there was something in his voice, a hesitation that hadn't been there before. "And you believe that?" Sophia asked. Damien didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked a question that surprised everyone in the room. "Margaret, could you show me exactly when and how you discovered the first evidence against Sophia?" "Damien, we've already discussed this. I want to see the original records. Now." Margaret exchanged nervous glances with her lawyers. "I'm not sure that's appropriate with the suspect present." "She's handcuffed and in federal custody," Damien said dryly. "I think it's safe." Reluctantly, Margaret opened her laptop and began navigating through the files. Sophia watched closely, and that's when she noticed something crucial: the dates on the documents. "Wait," Sophia said. "Stop there. Zoom in on that date." "You have no authority to—" began one of Margaret's lawyers. "Zoom in on the date," Damien repeated, his voice laden with new authority. On the screen, clearly visible, was a timestamp showing that the first report of suspicious activity had been created on the same day that Sophia had her first confrontation with Damien in the office, 3 weeks before any alleged criminal activity had occurred. The silence in the room was broken by Damien's voice, now icy. "Margaret, how did you create a report about suspicious activities before those activities supposedly happened?" "It must be a system error." "It's not an error," said a new voice from the door. Thompson entered the room, accompanied by 2 other Cross Consulting employees. "I'm sorry I'm late, Mr. Cross, but we needed to gather all the evidence." "Thompson, what are you doing here?" "Fulfilling your order, sir. You asked me yesterday to independently investigate the charges against Sophia Martinez." Thompson placed a thick folder on the table. "And we discovered some very interesting things." Margaret stood up abruptly. "Thompson has been fired. He has no authorization to—" "I reinstated Thompson last night," Damien said. "After our conversation, Margaret, I realized your explanations had too many gaps." Thompson opened the folder. "Mr. Cross, we found evidence that Ms. Whitfield maintains undeclared bank accounts overseas and has a stake in competing companies. More importantly, we discovered that she hired a digital security firm to create false evidence against Ms. Martinez." "This is ridiculous." Margaret was losing her composure. "Damien, are you going to believe this disgruntled employee instead of someone who has worked alongside you for 8 years? Damien picked up a document from Thompson's folder. It was a contract signed between Margaret and a company called Cyber Forensic Solutions, worth $200,000 for digital investigation and documentation services. "Margaret," Damien said slowly, "can you explain why you paid an outside company to investigate my assistant when we have an internal security department? I was protecting you. You were manipulating me." Damien's voice was cold as ice. "For 8 years, you made me believe that I needed your protection, that I couldn't trust anyone else. And all the while, you were systematically removing anyone who could positively influence me." Margaret tried one last ploy, Damien, you're making a terrible mistake. This woman taught me more about leadership in 6 weeks than you have in 8 years, Damien said, standing up. She showed me that it's possible to lead through trust and respect, not fear and control. He turned to the federal agents. Agents, I believe the evidence presented here shows that my employee was the victim of an elaborate frame-up. I would like to withdraw any cooperation from cross-consulting with the investigations against Sophia Martinez and transfer our full cooperation to investigate Margaret Whitfield. One of the agents nodded. We'll need to analyze all this evidence, but based on what we've seen here, there are sufficient grounds to suspend the proceedings against Ms. Martinez. As they removed Sophia's handcuffs, she felt as if she could breathe for the first time in weeks. But her attention was entirely focused on Damien, who approached her hesitantly. Sophia, he began, then stopped. How can you ever forgive me? The same way you forgave me when I yelled at you that first day, she replied softly, by recognizing that sometimes good people make wrong choices when they're afraid. Damien shook his head. It wasn't just fear, it was cowardice. I chose to protect my position instead of protecting you. And now I choose differently. Damien turned to the agents who were escorting Margaret out. Agents, cross-consulting will cover all of Ms. Martinez's legal costs and offer full compensation for the damage caused by our former employee. 6 months later, Sophia was standing on a stage at a convention center in New York City, addressing an audience of 300 executives on trust-based leadership. In the front row, Damien watched her with a proud smile. Cross-consulting, under the new joint leadership of both of them, he as CEO and she as Director of Organizational Development, had become a case study in corporate transformation. Employee turnover fell to less than 5%. Productivity increased 40%, and the company had been named Best Place to Work for the 3rd time in a row. Margaret had been convicted on multiple counts of fraud and evidence tampering. Richard, her accomplice in the original frame-up, also faced trial. But for Sophia, the real victory wasn't in the numbers or recognitions. It was in the fact that Damien had learned to trust, not just her, but his team, his instincts, and the possibility that true leadership comes from building people up, not controlling them. At the end of her speech, when the audience rose in enthusiastic applause, Sophia met Damien's eyes in the crowd. He had become not only a better leader, but a better man. And together, they had proven that even the most wounded people can learn to trust again, and that sometimes the greatest act of courage is allowing someone to help us change. Sophia Martinez's story wasn't just about surviving betrayal. It was about discovering that when we find people willing to fight for us, we can overcome any adversity and build something stronger than we ever imagined possible. Dear listeners, we hope that Sophia's journey has touched you deeply. Her story of resilience, courage, and transformation reminds us that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope for a fresh start. To continue this emotional journey with us, we have prepared a special selection of equally engaging narratives about overcoming challenges and second chances. You will find this playlist here on the side by clicking to the left. If Sophia's story moved you as much as it moved us, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like. This helps us continue bringing stories that celebrate the strength of the human spirit. Every day, we share unique narratives that explore the challenges and triumphs of real life. Don't miss our next stories of transformation and hope. We look forward to seeing you here in the comments, sharing how these stories touch your own journeys.